our live stream today. Hello, Neil. Long time
Hello.
no see.
Absolutely. Yeah, long time no see. Lovely to be here.
Yeah. I'm very pleased to have you here today so that we can talk about all these new developments. And as I said to you, I wanted to talk about the immune system as it's becoming more and more complicated, the toxic and the environmental insults we have, and of course, all the stress that is impacting the immune system. Before we had the disease, and now we have the war and the economic breakdown. And I have the notion that the immune system is reacting like everybody would be taking 10 milligrams of cortisone each day.
Yeah. Look, I completely agree with you. And, the impact actually on the being, on the whole of the being, is extraordinary. And, the focus that people have, like different people have different focuses. And in my clinical practice, what I see is that it's like a generalized increase, like there's a generalized rise in terms of the sort of insult to the immune system. And, if we think about the beautiful colleagues, the healers that have been interviewed by yourself, there's many and varied ways of actually approaching it. The issues in terms of what's going on with people's immune systems. But fundamentally, it all comes down to the fact that the immune system, which is really connected to the instinctive mind, is absolutely insulted. So what we're dealing with here is an insult to a whole mind functioning within the being. So we're talking about the mind associated with the gut brain. And it's absolutely in a riot. So one of the intriguing things is that we, when we're talking about the immune system, we would be thinking about the intelligence of the thymus gland or the spleen as being two, major actors in terms of what we're doing, we're dealing with. But really, it's actually the gut brain that is most actually tied up into what's going on. And it's insulted on every turn. So as you mentioned, there's all of the psychological warfare that's going on with the propaganda and everything else. And, added to that is the chemical insults and the dietary insults and all the rest of it. So as I was mentioning before we came on air, I've actually spent the day working with a group of people who, like you would think that they were people off the street. It's about 20 people I spoke to. And in those conversations, there was one after another, there was the issues around the insult to the immune system. So in other words, how the instinctive mind is actually trying to cope with things. So if we look into that, what we can do is we can sort of categorize it out. So we can think in terms of, the psychic pressure. So, we've talked a bit before, and we had that lovely interview that you did with me around how we can actually filter out the communications that are going on around the world. And, like more than ever, it's necessary to actually be doing this work, where we are actually able to make sense out of what's coming in, actually what's actually streaming in. And obviously the topic today of the immune system, what we're dealing with is, here's the environment, and what does the immune system do? It actually works with the environment. So how it's actually the being, like the physical body, how it's coping with the environment. So what are we doing with this information? We've got all of the psychic and, other, like we can use that word, but we use it in a very broad, sense of the word. But what are we doing with that? Like, for example, of the cruelty that's going on. And I know as a long-time vegan and vegetarian yourself, like that cruelty to animals, for example, what's going on with that? How does that actually impact upon the immune system? And fundamentally, the immune system is in a riot. It's in a riot because it's got all of that stuff coming in, all of that information. Obviously, added to that, there's the chemical and insults and these issues to do with new viruses and all the rest of it. Well, it's just more insults. So long and short of it is,
more, yes.
Yeah. So long and the short of it is that our immune systems are really coming under pressure. Like they're really, really coming under pressure. I was thinking about, this topic when I was driving here to have this conversation. And I remember our colleague, Kaimi Pilipovich, and he talked about the immune system. Kaimi's, he beautifully talked about it. He said, the immune system is about 1% warrior and about 99% peacemaker. And if we think about that, and we're looking at the insults to the immune system, it's the ways in which we're forcing the immune system out of its peacemaker role and into a warrior role. So what's going on from that? And again, I was thinking, how does that all connect into non-violence? So how do we actually work with non-violence around being a peacemaker? And it's a struggle. It's a real struggle for people.
And if you think of they are going more and more to the warrior side, it's a tremendous amount of energy that it is costing.
Yep.
And I don't know how it is on your side and with your clients, but with animals, I'm detecting more and more deterioration of the intestine flora.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very deep impact, even in the animals, that the intestine flora doesn't work anymore, and we get a lot of diseases deriving from there, from diarrhea to allergies to autoimmune disease. A lot coming up.
Yeah.
How is it in your clinic and with humans?
Well, look, I have a mixed clinic, so I have a lot of human patients as well as animal patients, and other sorts of beings as well. But the upsurge in microbial issues is fundamental. So we think about that immune system, and as I say, like the microflora form an incredibly important part of the immune system, and like they're in a riotous state based on this deluge of insult.
Mm-hmm.
I love the word and the idea of actually the insult to the immune system. So the microflora are insulted continuously, absolutely continuously. Can I ask the question in terms of what you're talking about with animals that you're having contact with? Are they mainly domesticated animals or wild ones?
Domesticated animals, very much connected to their owners, and those who are suffering the most are those who have owners that deeply care but come from a conditional side of love.
Okay. So
we have energies flowing between the animal and the owner, definitely.
Yeah. So we've got an insufficiency of allowing. Mm-hmm. So the humans aren't allowing enough in terms of the experience of the animal, and they're picking up on it. You and I have had this conversation before, and to me, there's a clear connection for a domesticated animal. With the ego of the human and the ego of the animal. Like the animal just really inherits the ego of the human. And it's not nearly so obvious in wild animals, that concept of an ego. And given that we're talking about the immune system and the instinctive mind is, like the immune system being an aspect of the instinctive mind, it's all about denial. So, an animal such as a cat, like where, take away from the fact that it's sort of been denatured by selection of breeds and all of that type of thing over a long period of time, take away the epigenetic elements. So like we talk about trauma that's inherited from generation to generation within the cat, then we add to it the egoic elements of the humans that are around those cats. Well, chances of that microflora in the cat being, straightforward and orderly is zero.
Yes,
and we're down to zero.
Then we add in the non-natural food they're getting, and we have it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's they call it a perfect storm. There's no, all the elements are there for it to be a crisis, you know. All the elements are there for a crisis. So it's interesting, the food element, like in the 20 or so patients that I work with today, there was, you know, many of them with microflora imbalances, and, you know, many of them where the digestive system itself was just felt like it was completely under threat. But the immune system generally, and plenty of virus cases, obviously, with the, you know, the new outbreaks of, you know, the coronavirus here in Australia. There's plenty of those cases in amongst them as well. And the immune system is just doing its best, you know, trying to actually manage all of that. So how does it go about coping with, you know, an infection of something which is unknown? You know, it's the nature of a novel virus. It's unknown to the immune system, and it's a problem. Like, there's no question about it. And as we talked about there earlier, the way in which the immune system is being funneled or coerced into this much more violent response is a significant issue from a therapy perspective, certainly from, you know, from where I look. And, you know, talking to our colleagues, you know, colleagues who are homeopaths or naturopaths. I've had patients recently who've been homeopaths, naturopaths, also chiropractic. So a wide range of people, and all of them are talking about the same thing. So in the case of a chiropractic, they're not necessarily looking at the instinctive mind, but they're certainly watching the way in which the immune system is impacting in the musculoskeletal system, and they can see it. So they can see the way in which the, you know, the person's body, like one of their patients' body, is actually interacting with that incoming stress, and it's obvious. It's obvious and clear to them. So it's not just me. It's not the crazy guy from Western Australia only, or the crazy cat lady in Greece. It's many colleagues who are actually identifying this, and in different ways. So in the case of somebody who's working with the physical body in the way of a chiropractor, you know, they're seeing this dramatic upswing of inflammatory responses. So everybody's stiff and all the joints are out of place, and the vertebrae aren't working properly, the joints aren't working, everything's stuck. And it's the same thing. What is it? It's the immune system. It's the way in which we're actually developing these inflammatory responses. If we look into the psychology, it's clear to any of them that the body psychology is all out of whack. It's everywhere.
Okay.
Everywhere.
So I see. I just wondered whether all the fatigue syndromes I'm seeing lately are depending on this excess energy that the immune system needs.
Yep. So chronic fatigue, ME, but interestingly, you know, like you would say, it was a completely unrelated set of conditions, but muscular sclerosis, so MS, and Parkinson's. So a lot of those nerve system disorders that are, you know, like seemingly unrelated, but they're actually immune responses. It's actually immune system response problems. So, and it gets worse than that. So you start looking at the upswing of depression and anxiety, all inflammatory, and it's an immune system response in the first place. So we end up with inflammation of, say, for example, head-brain tissues, and the outcome of it is depression. You know, so like we've got this gigantic upswing in depression. What is it? It's a problem with the immune system. Why is there a problem with the immune system? It's the insults. It's the insults that are coming in. So we've got all of these inflammatory conditions, including something as, you know, odd perhaps when we think about it as depression, but it's an inflammatory problem. So is anxiety.
Yeah, definitely. So I was just wondering, you know, this week was incredible for me. So many people died this week in accidents and from disease. So many animals died. How was this in Australia? Did you, in your clinic, did you see something like that?
I've had a couple of animal deaths this last week, and many accidents. many car accidents. Yeah, many. That's true. I don't know. I actually don't have an answer to that question, Marianne.
I wanted to ask you because I was pondering about people losing focus and attention together with the impact on the immune system, because it's all so stressful. And you know, when we have heightening cortisol levels, we have less attention.
Very, very common for us to be seeing imbalances in the adrenal hormones, so mainly epinephrine and norepinephrine. So that's very, very common that we're observing, and the consequent problems with the cortisol production, and then imbalances and dopamine responses as well. So we're continually seeing that, and all of it again, we can think of it as being inflammatory, but it's immune reactions. That's what's going on.
So I thought that this is interconnected, this crazy incidence of so many accidents and so many deaths and the immune system, the damage we see more and more and more.
To me, the better way of actually connecting all of this together would be it's an insult to the instinctive mind. So like everything that's natural. And if we think of the way that the instinctive mind operates, it runs thousands of processes all at once, in parallel, incredibly competent in terms of doing all of that. And if we are tipping a barrage of crazy consciousness onto it, well, making it harder and harder for it to operate. And it is an insult. It is an insult.
Definitely. And people like me who rely so much on the instinctive center, I like to be warned by it and I listen to it. But if I can't hear it anymore because it's overwhelmed and not functioning, I cannot be warned, be it a storm or be it an accident.
Yeah.
Makes it understandable. And when I think on the vagus nerve and all the connection to the intestines, it makes it more and more visible how all the intestine flora reacts. So what can we do in thinking of trying to help the instinctive mind? What can we do to get it into better energy or stabilize it?
I think the first thing is to work with it. And as I say, like you could work in any modality to actually achieve this. So homeopathy would be a perfect way of approaching this. But, talk therapy of the kind that I do definitely works as well. But, the first thing is to actually do some communication around actually and making it understandable what the perceived threats are. So as you're talking about the instinctive mind and the fact that you rely upon it to give you signals, a big part of that is actually it's the appreciation of what threat is. So given the confusion at the moment, the instinctive mind is struggling to actually work out what actually is real threat and what's not, and then further what would be a context to actually deal with it. So in terms of helping the instinctive mind, it's actually getting the perception more clear, so getting clarity for the perception. And if we're looking at it at that sort of psychic level or intuitive level, we're talking about the psychic or intuitive perception of risk and danger, and then helping it to actually filter it out so that we can say, yep, that is a genuine threat, that's a genuine problem, and this thing over here actually is, we're perceiving it as a problem, but really it's actually something that we just don't understand. We don't have context for, and so on. Yeah. So the next element would be actually helping the instinctive mind come into the year 2022. So our instinctive mind fundamentally is reasonably identical between a human and a cat, and for that matter, a human and a snake. So like it really is a very primitive structure, or primitive mind. But we've got to bring it into 2022, which means that we've got this horrendous upsurge and let me describe it. It's like, leveling it up. We need to level up the context framework for the instinctive mind to actually be able to refer to. Like, it's perfectly capable of actually coping with all of this new information, but we have to help it. So, for example, the explosion of microwave radiation, for example, and then the information that microwave radiation is bringing with it, that would be two good examples. And propaganda, so like all of the media propaganda and the way that all of that's working, that would be another good example. So what do we got to do? What we have to do is we've got to bring the instinctive mind into 2022 and provide it with help around the framework of context. Here is the context of what it is that you're experiencing. So in comes the information, and is it a disaster or is it just some new information? And the sense I have, and the therapeutic experience that I have in clinic, is that for the most part, it's just new information that it just needs help with. So, if we think in terms of homeopathic approaches, there's heaps of ways that we can actually expand perception, and we can open up the opportunities for new context and so on. There's lots and lots of ways that we could do it within homeopathy.
Yes, and now I realize why lately there are so many layers of shock remedies needed. Clients come and usually their constitutional remedy would work, but nowadays it doesn't, because somehow they are in a shock and you need a shock remedy first. That's the instinctive center who needs that treatment.
Absolutely. So you're treating the instinctive mind first. That's the first thing that's going on. And what are we doing? We're just actually providing it with some context. The shock goes out of it as soon as, like, why do we get shocked? Because we're surprised. Shock's all about surprise and unexpected.
Overwhelming out of the body.
Yeah, overwhelmed, absolutely. So what do? We bring it all back into focus so that, okay, that's near enough to that bit of information. I can cope with that. I can adapt with that, and all of a sudden, instead of it being 10% warrior, we bring it back to 1%. So dear old Kami, we bring it back to his principle, and literally that's what we're doing. We're just bringing it back into being a peacemaker, and we can be non-violent. The whole thing can be, what are your needs? These are my needs. How can we look after each other's needs? So, if we're thinking of the Marshall Rosenberg nonviolent approach, that's the big piece. That's the big start, isn't it? And we're looking at Neil dogma. So looking at my own dogma, or the 7 C's, we're making contact, we're holding contact, we're in connection. Mm-hmm. We're now communicating, and now we're finding commonality. At this point in commonality, we're actually starting to look at each other's needs and being able to recognize the self and the other. So we've got this threat that's coming in. It could be a viral threat. It could be any other kind of threat, dietary or whatever else that's going on. The threat's coming in, and we can see ourselves in the other. So we're getting close to the point where we could start finding the opportunities for cooperation. And that is Marshall Rosenberg, where you are saying, I see what your needs are. Like, that's great. We're sharing what each other's needs are, and we're going to work out ways that we can each deliver upon one another's needs. So you're at the point of cooperation. And then further from that, we can collaborate. And indeed, clinically, we see that going on all the time, particularly with the microflora and viruses. So, like, there's no reason why it can't be viruses in here as well. How can we actually collaborate? Let's work together on solving a joint project here. And it's not so matter actually that you're looking after each other's needs. You're now looking after a third party's needs. And, within the physiology of the body, wonderful opportunities. So here we are. We've got these 2022 problems, all of this, insanity of the world and everything else that's going on. And, what we can do is we can work out ways of actually connecting all of that in.
Yes, and I remember you saying that in the end, a virus is only a piece of information.
It's true. As a
Did this
consciousness,
information change with the variants?
yes. Interestingly, I thought this was a topic we were keeping away from, but
not the information what the virus said.
But no, it's interesting. The consciousness of the virus as it's mutating is getting nearer and nearer to the medicines. So the medicines which are commonly being administered, like they're getting closer and closer to each other. It's very interesting. So that's power and dominance, separation, all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it is information. It's just information. What do you do with it? And how you can, utilize it going forward is really on the upswing. So there's plenty of ways in which that information is useful. So if we're thinking about that, what we're talking about, an insult to the immune system and the instinctive mind, a new piece of viral information comes in. Is it an insult, or can we actually hear it, acknowledge it, recognize it for what it is, have some compassion for it and understanding for that information and the mechanism of which that information is being delivered to us? If we do that, then it's a pretty different outcome, isn't it?
Definitely. Energy is totally different. There's not, it's not restrained to struggle and fight. There's an openness in it. And that is costing not even 10% of the energy.
Yeah.
Which you would need to fight.
Right.
If you would only
That's
go
right.
for fighting.
Yeah. So we don't need to fight. We don't need to fight.
We are back to Gandhi. All the nonviolent approach and back to Marshall Rosenberg with nonviolent communication, nonviolent living. And I know that you are working with your clients on it. I'm working with my clients on it. What do you see that is the most difficult thing for humans to overcome violence in themselves?
Well, it's an interesting question because there's an element of violence which is extremely positive, and it's the element where it's being applied to change. So it's the election for change and the application of the energy that delivers into change. So with every change, there's something gets broken down and something gets put into its place, and it is necessarily a violent process. So I think the biggest barrier for people is being able to actually identify that energy of change, which is violent in its basis, being able to identify that from destruction. So for most people in their beings, there's this sort of chaos. So that notion of chaos, and what we're talking about is the difference between the violence associated with chaos and the violence associated with change. And, so that I think probably is the biggest problem for people, is being able to, yourself, within people and within yourself even, is that need just to wreck things. Like, I just need to be creating a train wreck, and everything's wrong and I've got to break it all apart and destroy it all. And that energy is not creative. So there's no creation in there. But you get this other thing, which is, you know what, I can do without these habits, these patterns, these behavior sets or memories or ways of perceiving, any of them. And so therefore I actually have to take apart that thing and then re-establish something new in its place. And that is a violent process. It is a violent process. And yet we are talking about non-violence, because the non-violence is associated with destruction. It's a totally different energy.
Yes, I
Is that
agree.
making sense?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It's totally different energy. The energy of destruction has no order in it. And if you go for real change and want to establish order, you have you have just order and stabilization in it sooner or later.
Yeah. That's not to say that there isn't, moments where it's hard.
Yeah.
If you think of any of your work on yourself or such like, it's not always straightforward.
No.
In fact, often not. In fact, often not. Yeah.
Would you say meditating would help the immune system?
I was wondering whether we might, sort of set up the framework for a meditative practice actually around it. Now we could do that now, and so it would be a modification of a meditation that I've been working with for some time with a number of patients. So not with all of them, but with a number. And it relates to the functioning of the five minds, but it particularly works with the immune system. So the focus is going to be, you happy if I establish the framework now? So
definitely,
what we can do,
go on.
So what it would be is it's based on a prayer that I was taught as a child. And in the prayer, it was how to recognize God. And there were 5 ways that in this prayer that you get to recognize God. The first way is a loving mother. And the second way is a kind father. The third way is an innocent child. And the fourth way is a helpful friend. And the fifth way is an inspiring teacher. And these are 5 ways that you can know God. And when we look at it, you can actually identify all of these elements within the individual. So, yourself, we can look at the God who is Mariana Kanagiza. And in my case, it would be the God, which is Neil Dougan. And we can identify that and organize it in many different ways. But the way we're going to do is we're going to actually look to supporting the instinctive mind. And the instinctive mind is going to be the innocent child. So we do this by crossing our right foot over our left foot and placing our left hand over our heart and our right hand over our pelvis. And what we're doing is we're setting up a circuit. This is, clearly a circuit like you would do in yoga or, water practice or, any of these things. You would set up these kinds of circuits. And in the middle, between our 2 hands, is our instinctive mind and the gut, so the gut brain. So we're bringing the relationship mind with our right hand, and it's the kind father energy. So we're bringing 100% masculine energy into our right hand. At the same time, we're bringing the loving mother into our left hand, and that's coming into the thoracic brain or the heart brain or the emotional mind. And in the circuit, we're joining up in the instinctive mind, the gut brain, and we're just breathing into that. And we're breathing in the natural masculine into the relationship mind. It's the kind father. So this is the father that would pick up the child that skinned its knee and put an arm around it and support it and guide it, to the help that it needs. It would be giving attention to the child. It's giving care and consideration and recognizing the child. It's bringing the energy of acknowledgement to the child. And this is all the natural masculine. So we're bringing that into the relationship mind, the pelvic brain. We're drawing that up into our innocent child, which is the instinctive mind. And the instinctive mind is connected to the immune system all around the body. At the same time, the loving mother is coming into the thoracic brain and the emotional mind. And we're just drawing that energy of the loving mother. Now, the loving mother is empathic. So it's the energy of empathy, the energy of compassion, the energy of emotional understanding. So we're delivering this energy of the loving mother into the thoracic brain and the emotional mind. And so they meet in the instinctive mind, the innocent child. So we've got the loving mother and the kind father, and they're working together to support the innocent child. The innocent child is the instinctive mind. So we're just drawing that energy in, just breathing that energy into the instinctive mind, the gut brain, and immediately we are aware of the microflora of the whole body, but particularly focused in this gut brain area. And the innocent child, which is a third way of us actually recognizing God, is being supported, is being cared for, is being understood, is being respected, is being valued. So the instinctive mind, the immune system, the gut flora, all of it is being respected, valued, being seen. We're just breathing into that. What's coming up here now for me, I'll just share, is that I'm getting like an evolutionary process for the immune system. So the things that we're talking about gaining new context and the opportunity for new context, that's possible because we're being cared for by the kind father and we're being understood by the loving mother. Now, there's two other elements of the way that we can recognize God, and that's the helpful friend. And the helpful friend in the situation is the mind associated with the spine. It's the moving mind. It's creative. And so as our innocent child is being recognized and cared for and acknowledged, at the same time, the helpful friend is coming in and helping the immune system to find new ways of solving problems, new ways of actually interpreting what has been thought of as insults that have been coming in and now is being seen as new data. It's new information that it can work with. And lastly, in the intellect and the head brain, we have the inspiring teacher, and the inspiring teacher is able to actually gather up all of this information and reconcile it and support the innocent child in the path of being able to actually migrate forward. So what is your experience of that, and how does that feel?
I'm getting extremely hungry. I usually don't eat that time. But this is what happened in the first moment when we started all this energy work, an extreme hunger. I usually don't eat before 3 in the afternoon. Greek living. That's very interesting. And somehow I'm happy. So from somewhere is coming a lot of relief.
It would be interesting to see what the appetite was for, because the instinctive mind, that innocent child, is providing appetite, which is completely different and new. So that's what's happening for you.
It is what I have in my mind is a really good tomato. A really sunborn, red, delicious tomato. Yes, I'm thinking full of biophotons because it's the image of the sun on the tomato.
Yeah,
so it's a real tomato, not a tomato coming from some, house or tunnel where they have it in, or some farm where they breed it. No, I'm thinking of a real good garden tomato, like in Granny's garden.
Yeah. So that's the sun energy, as you say. It's the sun energy coming in. Yeah.
So the question we can ask is, am I hungry for that healing energy of the sun?
Yes, and it's the biophotons, as you're saying. That's what the appetite is for. So there you go. That's a marvelous example of the instinctive mind, given some new context. So you're sitting here in the context of all of this, pandemonium that's going on around the world, and the new context is that we need more access to the sun. That's the result. That's the result that's going on there. It's interesting. I was actually getting the connection between the sun and what do you call them? Seaweed. So the kind of edible seaweeds that people will eat, but it was exactly the same energy. It was the biophotons. So I was picking up the energy of the sun in the seaweed.
So the immune system is asking for biophotons.
Yep.
So our recommendation for people would be to really do their own food in the garden. Give it access to the sun as good as possible.
And to eat it fresh.
Absolutely.
So without processing it. So yeah, so that the biophotons are actually literally coming in with the food. Yeah.
So that is what is stabilizing the immune system. I can see that.
Yeah. Holding the tomato in the case of what you're observing in your hand and allowing the biophotons to be emitted from the tomato into your body as well.
Yeah.
So, and it's the intention here is the sun. So you're holding the tomato, and as you go to eat it, I'm taking in the sun. So holding that higher consciousness intention, allowing it to be connected to the immune system. What's interesting is that as you were going through all of that, and I'm looking at you at the moment, strong connection to the thymus gland. So it's that very high level of intelligence around the immune system. And it's the discernment between the warrior, which is the 1%, and the peacemaker, which is the 99%. So that discernment is actually coming through in that energy that's coming from the sun through the tomato. It's giving you that opportunity for discernment. Because there is a time, like there is one time out of 100 where you do need to put up a fight.
Yeah.
Like the immune system has to do that. So we need to have that discernment running, but we don't want it to be 10 times out of 100.
Yes, because this is going then to allergy, to all the inflammations, to the autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
This is overreaction. So when we are thinking of biophotons, Neil, what about sun meditation, sunset, sunrise?
That meditation that we're doing there now, or we were setting up there before, it would be extremely useful to do this in the sun. And the focus would be bringing the sun into the innocent child, into the solar plexus, into the gut brain. So solar plexus, sun, what we're doing is we're actually literally bringing the sun in there. So sitting outside in the, like when you're not being sunburned, obviously, at some time of the day where it's safe to do that and comfortable to do it. But yeah, get some sun onto your skin and just feel it. Actually sense that coming into the solar plexus, into the innocent child. Very helpful.
Mm-hmm. This is why I was thinking of sunrise and sunset, because you're not hurt then.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, less of a problem.
That was great, Neil. So we have understanding now, we have help now, we got a meditation. We know that we can help ourselves with biophotons and good organic food and meditation. Is there anything you want to add?
Well, the thing that's coming up is that, if we think we've had a bumpy old 2 years behind us, there's more to come. And so the work that we're doing here today and what we're talking about around this insult to the immune system, we really need to run it forward in a way where we're going to be checking in with our instinctive mind and with our immune system, so that we're continuously checking in and making sure that we're giving it every opportunity to increase its context, that it can work within, and also supporting it to maintain the open channels of perception. So we're talking about the physical senses, the subtle senses, the meridian chakras, nadis, access to memories, access to other psychic information which could be coming in. So just having that acknowledgement that our instinctive mind and the gut brain as well, so it's both the brain and the mind, is going to need upgrading, or upgrading is probably the wrong word, but there's definitely a shift that's actually required, and we need to support it in allowing all of that to occur. So that's what's coming up, is it's like a preparation. So when you've got that tomato in your hand and you're setting the intention that I'm bringing the sun into my body as I eat the tomato, in the same way, what we're doing is we're saying we're bringing the future into the present, and we're allowing the sun and the earth and the universe in general to be informing us, so that we don't see everything as being a threat, so that we can allow the experience to actually be enriching and nourishing for us. So just like the tomato is going to be nourishing, well, what about all the experiences that are coming up? So the craziness that's going on with the the media or the politicians or whatever else that's going on, commercial setting of the world and all the rest of it, allow it to actually be food for us, so that we can get out of that insanity, the definite insanity. It's no point saying it's an imaginary insanity. It's not. It's crazy. Like it's absolutely crazy. But let's turn it into a healthy tomato. Let's actually allow that experience. So, we watch the news on the television for whatever reason. I don't have a television. I know you don't either. But if we were, that it would be nourishing for us. So here we've got this experience of the fear machine or whatever else that's going on, and let's allow that to be just like the tomato, full of sun, full of earth. So this would be what I would recommend.
I begin to understand a bit more now. Sometimes I like a juice or so, but lately I had no notion to buy something. I went to my garden, I did myself a peppermint syrup because I wanted to know what I drink. And sometimes I like to have a piece of cake, but I don't want to buy anything anymore. I'm doing myself just a bit of a dough and some fruit on top, and I know what is in there. And all my cooking is going to be very simple, but as much from the garden as I can possibly get.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing processed. So it was the instinctive mind going for that.
Absolutely. So there's a big piece in there too, which is, connecting to the environment in the way of the microflora of the, of food, and the soil and all of that as well. So that will help tremendously in terms of turning, for example, all of that propaganda and everything into something which is nourishing for you. Is that at every level you just need to be integrating with it. You just have to be integrating.
I see. How can we help animals with that?
Well, even the wild animals are intersecting with the craziness of humans at the moment. So I would be working with compassion and understanding for their suffering. So the way in which the wild animals and, microflora, everything else, is being taken over by the insanity of humans, it's holding compassion for them. So like holding space so that there is actually space for their suffering. Like I'm aware of, as you know, like I'm a permaculture gardener myself, and, working with the permaculture, it's critical to actually have understanding and love and so on, that compassionate empathy for the experience of the microflora within the soil, as an example, let alone the plants and animals and that sort of thing in the permaculture as well. But that would make a tremendous difference in terms of your intersection with your immediate environment. Obviously, you've got a whole pile of cats there with you, and having compassion for them in terms of how they're, connecting into the all of that would make a big difference. And I've got a dog at the door at the moment who would like to come in and, say hello. So we're saying hello through the door anyway. And, so that's compassion and understanding for the dog in terms of how it's intersecting with the humans. Humans are up and down all over the place around him or her. And, she is, she benefits from being seen in her suffering. So the compassion for her suffering and that.
But in reality, it would make sense if humans would do coherence work, meditating, at least trying to be in the here and now, to be of some comfort for the animals.
Clearly, this would help.
Okay.
Yeah. But even like the wider populations, as you know, I do a lot of animal and plant communication, that type of thing. And, I'm working at the moment, the wheat is all germinating out in the fields, and I'm in communication with them.
Yeah. We get the first fires, area is burning again tremendously today.
So connecting into that distress and the suffering of the trees and the animals, that are in those forests is a huge piece as well. Here in Australia, this is not news to me, that process, where you literally need to actually give presence to the suffering of the forests.
Yeah, the old pine forest is burning on Evia today. They are trying like crazy to get it down. Last year, 3 parts of Evia burned down, and now the last part is burning.
Okay.
Don't know what's happening on that island. It's crazy.
Well, it's definitely a rebirth opportunity for the island. It's the circle of life, and that part of the ecosphere of the island is dying. Encourage the rebirth, encourage the new expression.
This is what I was telling those people who were so sad because relatives of them died last week, that it's rebirth on the other side.
Well, as you know, from a permaculture perspective, it is all a circle. And if you're attached to holding on to things, well, then that becomes a pathology in its own right.
And a lot of suffering.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. Neil, is there anything you want to add to our talk, or are we finished?
I have a feeling that we've actually had a pretty good go at this, Marianne. So I appreciate being invited to come and talk to you about, my understanding of the insults to the immune system, and they're many and varied. So we've been discussing them, and the psychological and psychic or intuitive aspects of those insults are exploding, and there's a clear way forward, which is to be conscious.
Definitely.
Way forward.
Definitely.
And for anybody, I would recommend.
I posted the link for making contact with you and your Calendly
welcome.
thing into the chat. So if anybody wants to talk to you or needs help, can do so.
Lovely. And I would recommend them to reach out to you as well, because, you know, I've been, you know, you're very kindly making out I know more about the subject than you, and the reality, of course, is that you know as much as me. But yeah,
we don't know that. But together we know more than alone.
True, and that's an important element, you know, with what we're talking about here is listening to each other's needs, fulfilling each other's needs.
Yeah.
And then we can think about cooperating.
I wasn't that aware of the biophotons. And I see that more clearly now.
What I would leave you with then, seeing as that was the question, is that in addition to the biophotons, is actually the cosmic rays that are coming in from the rest of the galaxy. Mm-hmm. And the information that they're bringing. Mm-hmm. And it's a tremendous opportunity at the moment to help us to actually reconcile all of this change that's going on. So, and it literally is photons that are coming from the galaxy that we're dealing about. They're very, very long wavelength, sort of meter length waves, light waves. But they bring a tremendous amount of information at the moment. And never more needed than, you know, with us trying to actually cope with all of these changes in the environment.
Definitely. On Monday, I spoke to a spiritual teacher from Switzerland, and he said, in the future, we will look back on this time as the time of tremendous transformation.
That would be the master of the understatement.
Yes, this is what the Swiss people do. They're into understatements. Okay, Neil, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for the meditation. I hope everybody that's looking at this video later will do the meditation, and maybe do the meditation in sunset or sunrise, just as they please. Focus on the photons.
Yep.
And reconcile.
Reconcile, definitely.
Thank you so much, Neil.
Thank you. And talk again.
Talk soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.